This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're on the road in Denver, Colorado. This week marks the 100th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide. On April 24th, 1915, the Young Turk government of the Ottoman Empire began a systematic, premeditated genocide of the Armenian people, an unarmed Christian minority living under Turkish rule. An estimated 1.5 million Armenians were exterminated through direct killing, starvation, torture, and forced death marches. Another million fled into permanent exile. An ancient civilization was expunged from its homeland of 2,500 years. Today, the Turkish government continues to deny the genocide. Books about the slaughter are banned in Turkey, and its government lobbies heavily in the United States as well against congressional resolutions on genocide. In a minute, we'll be joined by three guests, but I first want to turn to a recording of Armenian broadcaster and writer David Barsamian's mother, recalling her experience during the Armenian genocide as a young girl. Araksi Barsamian survived, but her parents and brothers did not. In 1986, she told her story to a history class at the University of Denver. She's introduced by the well-known broadcaster of alternative radio, her son, David Barsamian.
Now you will hear eyewitness testimony from Araksi Barsamian, my mother. She survived the Turkish genocide of the Armenians. Her parents, 4 brothers, and members of her extended family were not so fortunate. Araksi was born in the village of Dubne, north of the historic Armenian city of Dikranagert, now called Diyarbakir. Her parents were Giragos and Mariam Giragosyan. Her younger brothers were Sarkis, Mardiros, Hovsep, and Tavit. Unaware of the looming calamity about to envelop her, she remembers an omen. Early in 1915, the village was covered with grasshoppers. Elders said it was a bad sign. A few months later, the wheat was ripe and about to be harvested when the end came. The Turks came to the village, took all the men and young boys, marched them outside of town, and shot them. The remaining women and children were told to assemble at the church. They were going to be resettled, that was the euphemism for deportation, to the uninhabitable desert wastes hundreds of miles to the south. They were to walk to their new homes. Promises that they would be protected en route were quickly broken. The defenseless caravans were waylaid and attacked throughout the deportation march. Girls were kidnapped and raped. Starvation and disease took care of many of those the Turks did not kill. Araksi walked as far as the city of Urfa, where she was separated from her mother, brothers, and other relatives. She eventually found her way into an orphanage in Aleppo, in northern Syria. In August 1921, she married my father, Bedros Barsamian, in Beirut. 3 months later, they were living in a tenement walk-up on Horatio Street in New York's West Village. The following year, at 17, she had the first of her 4 children. In 1986, just a few months before her death, Araksi spoke to a history class at the University of Colorado at Denver. I was there with her. She begins by describing what happened to her father.
When we left, my family was 25 in the family. They took all the men folks. They asked my father, "Where's your ammunition?" He says, "I sold it." So he says, "Go get it." So when he went in a Kurd town to get it, they beat him and they took him all his clothes, and they didn't, when he came back, this is my mother tells me story. When he came back, bare body, he went in a jail. They cut his arms. "Where's the ammunition?" He says, "I haven't got it. They didn't give me." So he died in a jail. And all the men, they took all the men in the field. They tied their hands and they shoot it, killed it. Every one of them. I remember they collect the only 15 years old boys left, just like this. They were sitting and their hands are tied back, and they took in a field. They shoot them too. Nothing left, only women and small children. We were in some
Marched, deported.
We deported in some city, bare food, nothing to eat. They took everything from us. They say, we put in a church, when you come back, we'll give you back, which is not true. So we went to some city. My aunt gave a birth. She left her baby over there, and then we walk. So many, no water. I remember my mother used her handkerchief and, horse urine and wipe our mouth. We were so dry. Just think that. And then in Chitzim, I forgot lots of things. If I remember things day and night, I tell not finish.
That was Araksi Barsamian, mother of the well-known radio broadcaster and writer David Barsamian. She's a survivor of the Armenian Genocide. David lives in Boulder, Colorado, where he hosts alternative radio, but he's overseas today commemorating the 100th anniversary. For more, we're joined by three guests. Here in Denver, Anahid Kachian's father was a survivor of the 1915 Armenian Genocide. She's interviewed 44 survivors here in the United States. And Simon Magakian is a lecturer in political science at the University of Colorado, an activist with Armenians of Colorado. In New York, Peter Balakian joins us, professor of humanities at Colgate University, author of The Burning Tigris, The Armenian Genocide and America's Response. His new books include the poetry collection Ozone Journal, about trauma, memory, and art, and Vise and Shadow, a collection of profiles of Armenian poets and artists who were killed or affected by the genocide. His op-ed in the Los Angeles Times is headlined, "On Armenian Genocide, Go Ahead and Offend Turkey." We welcome you all to Democracy Now! Peter, I want to begin with you. Why is the Armenian Genocide so difficult for many in the United States to get accurate information on?
Well, I really think there's been an amazing kind of development of scholarship over the last 25 years. I think right now the bibliography on the Armenian Genocide is impressive, and there are amazing works of scholarship from scholars around the world, from different archives and different cultures. So I do think there's been an enormous recovery of this history, which had been more obscured, I suppose, more lost in the 1970s and 80s. But now I think that the frequency of teaching the Armenian Genocide in the curriculum around the country, both in high school and at the university level, is on its way to becoming almost standard in certain kinds of courses, and especially in courses that deal with the World War I era or that deal in genocide and human rights studies and issues.
What does the Turkish government say today?
Well, you know, the Turkish government's denialism has been a consistent policy from really the time of the event. I mean, even at the time, the Minister of the Interior, Talat, was engaged in wholesale denial of the mass killings as they were happening on the spot. He was trying to bury skeletons and bones from European inspectors. And Turkey has persisted in a deeply misguided kind of nationalist project in which they're incapable of dealing with this enormous crime that's lodged at the very cornerstone of their modern history. They continue to have a state-educated, a state-mandated education system in which there is no critical analysis allowed or permitted in the curriculum, and for the most part, the genocide of the Armenians is ignored, or it is given 2 or 3 sentences in which the Armenians are vilified and blamed for their own fate. I do think that behind this...
And how does Turkey, Peter, how does Turkey affect academia, people learning this in the United States?
Well, again, here I'm happy to say we have seen an amazing shift. 25 years ago, there was still what I would call a pernicious kind of Turkish nationalism that infested the teaching of Middle Eastern studies, and Ottoman studies was really under the tight control of Ankara. That has passed. There's a new generation of young, talented Ottoman scholars, Middle East scholars, and, of course, many, many other scholars in different fields. But the breakthrough in the Ottoman studies world has been really noticeable. So I think what was once a more pernicious situation is less so. Nevertheless, there are still official kind of state-involved Turkish deniers out there, and they exist in a few pockets around the nation, and I think slowly that will erode because they remain on the wrong side of truth, critical inquiry, and history.
Simon Magakian, talk about what's happening here in Denver at the state capitol.
This afternoon, Governor Hickenlooper and the Armenian community will unveil an Armenian Genocide monument on state capitol grounds in memory of all crimes against humanity. How did this happen? Started 3 years ago when the Armenian community was offered a donation by a man named Alexander Derhovagimian from Armenia. And we already had a garden installed by Armenians of Colorado in 1982. So building on that project, we were able to work with the state, get the General Assemblies and the governor's support to bring this beautiful monument to Colorado.
What does it look like?
It's a khachkar. It's intricately carved, has different symbols on it of different faiths. It's actually a replica of a monument that was destroyed only 10 years ago.
And can you talk about your own family history?
My family is from Urfa. That's where Araksi Barsamian was taken on the march. It's a magical place, the homeland of Abraham and my ancestors, Hagop and Khatun. Hagop was a soldier in the Ottoman army, and when he returned home in 1918, no one welcomed him or thanked him for his service. He had no idea that the Armenian Genocide had been going on, and his entire family had been either wiped out or driven out, except for his would-be wife, Khatun, who was hiding and living secretly with a kind Turkish widow. And my would-be great-grandmother was rescued, and the two met in Aleppo years later, and that's where my grandfather and his 3 brothers were born.
Anahit Kachian, can you talk about your family's history, particularly your father and what happened to him?
My father, Azad Kachian, was 6 at the time of the genocide, at the beginning. They lived in the northern Black Sea seacoast city of Trabzon. And when they realized they must flee, they went to the port and were told the last boat that allowed Armenians left this morning, and they missed the boat by half a day. And from that, he was taken with his sister, 6 years old, 4 years old, to a place that did take children. We do not know exactly where this place was, but they were left at a place that took children. From that place, eventually, he was, with other children his age, put on a march. He was told, we're going out on a picnic. They started out, and the march began. He was, as a child, put on the march for several years through the mountains, walking. Like Araksi was saying, the parching, more than hunger, was the thirst. The walking, blistering his feet. He had scars to the end of his life on his foot. But he survived. He survived. He was taken by different Arab families, even Turkish families, and he always recognized that there was help from certain Turks did help him, and then put back on the march until the end of World War I, when Near East Relief Americans helped him get on his feet. It helped him and thousands of other orphans who had survived but bedraggled, really truly bedraggled. But Americans helped him get back on his feet. He was taken to an orphanage in Beirut where Dr. Stanley Kerr and his wife Elsa raised him all the way, educating him in Beirut all the way through medical school at the American University of Beirut.
Peter Balakian, you are a poet as well as an author. I was wondering if you could share a poem about the Armenian Genocide.
I'm happy to, and in light of the beautiful and moving stories of survivors that you have brought together today, I'd like to read a short poem of mine called After the Survivors Are Gone. I tried to imagine the Vilna ghetto, to see a persimmon tree after the flash at Nagasaki. Because my own tree had been hacked, I tried to kiss the lips of Armenia. At the table and the altar, we said some words written ages ago. Have we settled for just the wine and bread, for candles lit and snuffed? Let us remember how the law has failed us. Let us remember the child naked, waiting to be shot on a bright day with tulips blooming around the ditch. We shall not forget the earth, the artifact, the particular song, the dirt of an idiom, things that stick in the ear.
Beautiful.
Your thoughts, Simon, when you listen to Peter?
Peter so well connects the history of what happened to us to the suffering of many more around the world. And it is very important to understand that the Armenian Genocide is what defined the international laws of crimes against humanity and genocide. And it is important to recognize all the atrocities that have been committed by governments against the very people that we're supposed to protect.
The Pope's statement on the Armenian Genocide, Anahid, what did that mean to you?
It was a light, it was a spotlight that was so very, very energizing. My father would have been absolutely enthralled by it. All he wanted was recognition, acknowledgement by the powers that be in Turkey now. And the Pope spoke to it. He gave voice to it in a public arena, wide arena.
What, Simon, do you want Americans and people around the world to understand on this 100th anniversary of the beginning of the Armenian Genocide?
I want everyone to understand that the cycle of genocide will continue unless we recognize the injustices of the past. Hitler is famously quoted as saying, "Who after all remembers the Armenians?" before he launched the attack on Poland. We have to recognize the history and the trauma that the Armenian people face to this day.
Well, I want to thank you all for being with us. Anahid, will you be also at the state capitol today?
Very much so.
Is there a large Armenian community here in Denver?
Yes.
Well, I want to thank you all. Peter Balakian in New York, professor of humanities at Colgate University, author of The Burning Tigris, The Armenian Genocide and America's Response. Anahid Kachian, thank you for joining us, whose father was a survivor of the 1915 Armenian Genocide. She's interviewed scores of survivors in the United States. And Simon Magakian, lecturer in political science at the University of Colorado, activist with Armenians of Colorado. That does it for our broadcast. Monday through Wednesday, we'll be broadcasting from The Hague, so do tune in. Special thanks to our crew here in Denver at the Open Media Foundation, Ann Thies and Tony Shawcross and Gvain Dahl, Shannon Altner, Nicole Marquez, Ivy Farr, Dana Thibault, Dennis Moynihan, and Julie Crosby. Democracy Now! Is produced by Mike Burke, Renee Feltz, Aaron Mate, Nermeen Sheikh, Steve Martinez, Sam Alkoff, Hani Massoud, Robbie Karen, Dina Guzder, Amy Littlefield, Anna Ozbek, Sam Riddell, Miguel